In the fall of 1944, the 1st Marine Division was sent to capture a small Pacific island. Military intelligence expected a quick victory, but what they faced was a nightmare unlike anything they had imagined. A determined enemy combined with a deadly landscape turned this seemingly routine operation into a grueling and costly struggle that would haunt military strategists for years to come. In this video, we'll dive into the harrowing battle for Peleliu, the missteps, the unimaginable challenges faced by the Marines, and the lasting questions about whether this island was truly worth the severe cost in lives. By mid-1944, American victories in the Pacific had brought the conflict close to Japan. The U.S. Army and Navy disagreed on how to proceed in defeating the Japanese Empire as quickly and with as few casualties as possible. Admiral Chester Nimitz advocated a more direct route to Japan, bypassing the Philippines and seizing Okinawa as a staging point for a future invasion of the Japanese mainland. General Douglas MacArthur, on the other hand, desired to keep his promise to return to the Philippines and advocated for its recapture prior to the invasion of Okinawa. Eventually, MacArthur's strategy was chosen. However, before MacArthur could retake the Philippines, the island of Peleliu was to be captured and an airfield built to protect the southern flank of MacArthur's planned landings in the Philippines. The 1st Marine Division was chosen to carry out the assault. Its commander, Major General William Rupertus, predicted that the island would be secured within 4 days due to the low troop quality of the Japanese garrison and the lack of elevation on the island. Rupertus was confident in his Marines' combat skills and expected most of the Japanese garrison to be crushed by the sheer weight of American firepower. Unfortunately for his men, Rupertus was relying on flawed intelligence to make his assessment. In reality, Peleliu was occupied by approximately 11,000 Japanese troops from the experienced 14th Infantry Division, along with support units. The division, regarded as a crack unit, had been transferred from China to stem the tide of U.S. advances across the Pacific. A light tank unit and an anti-aircraft detachment supported the garrison, which was heavily armed with mortars and artillery. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa oversaw the island's defensive preparations. He had no illusions of pushing U.S. troops back into the sea and was resigned to eventually losing the battle. As a result, he modified the strategy from earlier Japanese island defenses that had fiercely defended enemy beach landings, leaving the defenders vulnerable to naval bombardment. Instead, he focused on maintaining his combat power for as long as possible in order to extend the campaign and maximize enemy casualties. He prohibited costly banzai charges and concentrated his forces on the Umerbrogel Mountain, a series of heavily fortified hills and ridges in the island's interior. Taking advantage of the dense, winding coral ridges, he ordered the construction of heavily fortified bunkers, caverns, and other underground positions that interconnected to form lethal crossfire zones. Prior to the landings, the defenders had to endure a massive 3-day bombardment from an armada of battleships and cruisers, interspersed with airstrikes from 8 aircraft carriers and 11 escort carriers. U.S. troops watched in awe at the massive firepower on display and believed the bombardment to be extremely successful. In reality, Japanese soldiers remained deep in their fortified positions, waiting for the American assault to begin, and were virtually unscathed. At 8:32 on September 15, 1944, U.S. Marines landed on the beaches of Peleliu. Scores of landing crafts and other vehicles, including many amphibious tractors fitted with 75mm guns, had been disabled or destroyed within an hour of hitting the beaches due to heavy and precise enemy fire. Heavy flanking fire quickly pinned down the regiments on either side. Only the Middle Regiment made good progress on the first day, aided by having its flanks covered by the other 2 regiments. As they got closer to the airfield, they encountered Nakagawa's mechanized counterattack, led by roughly 15 Type 95 light tanks with infantry support. This prevented the Marines from taking the airfield on the first day, but most of the counterattacking force was destroyed in the process. The 5th Marine Regiment finished capturing the airfield the next day and forged ahead, arriving at the island's eastern shore 2 days later. The 1st Marine Regiment, positioned on the left flank, made the slowest progress, owing to its proximity to the Japanese stronghold of the Umabregol Hills. The troops on the ground soon realized that what appeared to be flat terrain in aerial reconnaissance photos was actually steep ridges and hills covered in a dense jungle canopy. There were about 500 limestone caves in the Umabregol, which were connected by tunnels. Japanese combat engineers installed sliding armored doors at many cave entrances and constructed bunkers. The 1st Marine Regiment suffered increasing casualties as they attempted to advance through the hills. Following a long, bloody, and exhausting effort to force the Japanese out of every cave and bunker in front of them, the Marines found that capturing one stronghold would leave them open to direct fire from the next one up ahead. Umabregol was dubbed Bloody Nose Ridge by the Marines. The 1st Marine Regiment suffered 70% casualties in just 6 days of intense fighting. Rupertus refused to acknowledge that his Marines required assistance from Army reinforcements and attempted to make up the numbers by using support troops as infantry. Rupertus and his superior, Major General Geiger, met at the 1st Regiment's command post on the 21st to talk about the situation. Rupertus was adamant that the Marines did not require Army assistance to capture Peleliu, but Geiger could see that the regiment had virtually ceased to exist as a fighting force. Overruling Rupertus, he directed the 321st Regiment of the 81st Infantry Division to replace the Marine Regiment. On September 26th, Marine Corsairs landed on the airstrip and launched ground support missions with rockets and napalm. By October 20th, the 2 Marine regiments had been relieved by the rest of the 81st Infantry Division. Combat operations on Peleliu were now under the Army's command. On November 24th, Nakagawa transmitted his final radio message to headquarters and performed seppuku. 3 days later, the island was declared secure, bringing an end to the 73-day battle. Although 35 Japanese soldiers held out until April 22, 1947, they only surrendered after a Japanese admiral convinced them that the war was over. Just under 10,000 casualties were reported among U.S. ground forces. The casualty rate was higher than in any other amphibious operation during the Pacific War. The debate over whether possession of Peleliu was worth the cost continues to this day. Admiral Halsey wanted to destroy the island's airstrip and then bypass it by going straight to Leyte Island in the Philippines, but Nimitz overruled him because the airfield captured on Peleliu played no role in any subsequent operations, and the Japanese garrison lacked the ability to interfere with potential U.S. operations in the Philippines. The island had little strategic value. The battle is still controversial today, with many believing that the conquest of Peleliu was a Pyrrhic victory.
Subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you don't miss the next video.